Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a fantastic show today, where we're going to be looking back of the past year of the buff and all the things we have learned from each other, and continue to learn in the futures. However, I definitely can't do this episode alone. So as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how are you doing today?
Zach, I am 1 year into this podcasting with you, and I am absolutely wonderfully, stupendously fantastic. It is like I said, like I've been saying now for a year, it is a great day to do a podcast with you. And I want to thank you, Zach, for doing this with me for a year, but I want to thank our listeners for dealing with us for a year. If you've been on for the full year, then hey, happy anniversary to you guys too. We know you should know that we appreciate what you're doing. We are a global top 10% podcast because of you guys. As usual, hey, contact us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. Look, shoot, that's a big list, Zach. We're on a lot of things. Hey, if you are new to the podcast, you're only 1 year behind, all right? So you only have like 50 some episodes. You go back and listen to catch up. We are glad you're here. We'd like to ask you to give us 4 episodes. All right, and we'll give you a reason to come back for more. It takes us a while to, may take you a while to get used to what we're doing here, but please feel free to come on in and listen every week, and we'll give you something to talk about. Remember, if you refer a friend to the podcast, you will get a free episode. And remember, hit that subscribe button, the listen button, the follow button, the tell us when the Bufnagle guys are doing that Bufnagle thing again. Hit that button, and you'll get the content delivered right to your doorstep. We'll deliver it personally in a small unwrapped box with a bow on the top.
But not digital recording .mp3.
Yeah, we'll do it like that. And we probably will leave without causing a commotion. So, but Zach, it has been a year that we've been doing this thing, and that is I don't know if that's more than I anticipated. Or less.
That's 100% more than anticipated, because this whole thing was a brainchild of mine 5 years ago. And then we couldn't decide on a name, and you're like, and then I'm like, hey, let's do a podcast. And you were the only one dumb enough to agree to do a podcast with me.
That's right. We couldn't get the others to, and that, I guess that's one of those things. Okay. So that's lesson 0, right? Is if you want to do something, start doing it and see what, I had a boss who said, and I think this is a quote from somebody else, anything worth doing is worth doing wrong, is what he said. He said, at some point you have to start. At some point you have to go. And we did that. Zach, we did that really before we
have what we were doing.
Yeah. Well, we didn't, I'm not so sure we don't know what we're doing, but we started with kind of just an idea to have conversation about things that were important to us. But we've kind of changed that over the year, and we have a different subtle focus than we did before.
Yeah, I think we started with having we talk about thing X for 15 minutes, and then we do thing 2 for 10 minutes, and then we do thing Delta for 5 minutes.
I heard what you did there. That was
nice. And then it would just it was this clump thing of 30 minutes, and it was really fast, and we realized we wanted to talk more about stuff, and what we were talking about, other people were already doing, and they were doing it well, and people knew about those people. If you had a sports podcast, you went to somebody affiliated with ESPN or The Athletic or Sportsnet or some group like that. If you wanted to hear about politics, you went to your favorite modern day political thinker. But nobody was talking about the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans and the ancient Egyptians, and no one was really talking about this human pursuit of life that necessarily I saw and that I love about, being a human and being a person. And we kind of shifted the whole idea of what the Bufnagle podcast was. And, it's been morphing and changing and growing, and we've finally kind of figured it out, and we know what we want to do, and it's been fun.
Yeah, it is interesting to look back, and I would I want to recommend, Zach, that you go back and listen to those old episodes, but then I don't want you to do that because that's kind of like reading, like when you were in seventh grade, you wrote your report on like James Van Buren or what, Martin Van Buren, James Buchanan. You wrote something about a president, and you were like, "Man, that was really awesome what I did in seventh grade." And then you go back and you read that when you're in college, you're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm surprised they let me graduate from seventh grade." And actually, I think I did mine on Ulysses Grant. Well, anyway, but it kind of feels like that with the podcast. If you go back and listen to that stuff, you're like, yeah, I think we're doing a little bit better now than we were before. We've solidified some of the way the shows go together, and Zach, we went from no theme song to the first theme song to now the second theme song, and that's one has had a lot of staying power. And I've heard people say, I've talked to some of our listeners, they're like, yeah, there's sometimes like during the week on a given day, I'll be going do 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 do, and I was like, wait, that's the Bufnagle theme song. And so it has a little staying power. It's a little ditty. What do they call it? An earworm. So if that's happening to you, that's okay. That means you're just like one of us.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. Like we've kind of had these series or these arcs, as I've called them, of we talk about history, but we don't talk about history for a month. It's we talk about it as it wanes and it ebbs and it flows to kind of get listeners in as we talk about multiple different things, because we want to talk about the pursuit and the adventure of life, whatever that may be. Maybe it was somebody in the 1800s going out for an exploration of the world and understanding how the world was bigger connected. Maybe it's our bringing in people who had understanding of coaching or leadership experience and how that has impacted their life and the people that they have impacted. And we're bringing in these human stories and this human endeavor that we're all on to hopefully rise people up and positively impact them in that way.
Yeah, this is I have to say, because I was reading an ancient history book about the time we started this podcast, and the thing I remember very vividly, the discussion you and I had about when I learned that Aristotle tutored Alexander the Great. To me, that is like one of the great connections in different endeavors in the ancient past, and we discussed that on the Cleopatra episode.
I'm pretty sure we discussed that on multiple episodes.
Well, but see that to me is so fundamental, and I'll tell you this much: learning these things is it's a hard thing because there's so much history back there, and there's so many ways you can take it, and the only way you really learn it is to talk about it a lot. You have to read it, and then you have to talk about it, and like. We joke all the time. We call him Socrates, right? But we talk about Socrates, we talk about Plato, we talk about Aristotle, and I think one of those early episodes, I get the order wrong, right? Even those fundamental little things are so easy to get wrong unless you do it on a regular basis. But now here we are a year into it, Zach, and I know Socrates was first, and then Plato was second, and Aristotle was third, and when you do that, when you read a lot of these things and you listen to people talk about them and you talk about them yourself, you get to the point where you come to really understand them. And I tell you, it lets you tie them all together. It gets easier to add pieces to them then, like when we got to the School of Athens, the painting by the guy who painted the School of Athens.
One of the Ninja Turtles.
Yes, one of the Raphael. See, I knew that now, and I knew he was a Ninja Turtle.
That now. I don't think that's how knowledge works.
Well, so, but when we got there, it's easier to take those pieces then and add them. You got to build a foundation somewhere. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about this again. I've talked about it before. You bring up School of Athens. You bring up education of history. If I was a high school history teacher, the first thing I would do is day one of history class, I would show the School of Athens, and then I would break down that painting person by person, like, oh, this is Alexander the Great. And that's the trail into the understanding the Greek Empire and the Macedonian Empire and the Hellenistic Age. And then when you're done learning about that, you zoom back out and you choose on the next guy. And it's this great little dissection of the ancient world and studying it in that way. And it's a fun new perspective on how to do that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember back because I took this history stuff in high school, and I'm trying to remember if I took any history in college. I don't know if I ever did. I just read a lot of stuff: history of exploration, history of mathematics, history of the sciences, and but it to me those things go together as little stories that you put onto your timeline. I imagine in my head there's this huge timeline from like in the past to you can't see what I'm doing. I'm pointing left for past and to the right in the future, and here I am kind of in the middle. But there are these little chunks of time, and I want to put these people. I want to sequence them and kind of overlap them to see where they go. And if you do that, you can. I think it's easier to learn story by story than to just start and say 30,000 years ago somebody stepped out of the African savannah and founded the Medes or whoever it was. What?
The city of Ur.
Right, or this Mesopotamia. Or I think we start in the past and we go to the future. And I'm starting to think that's probably not the right way to do it. We ought to start with something that interests you and then figure out how it got to be and then tell that story. And eventually you get these bricks and they will form this wall of history. And you'll say, yeah, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy. Or I know that gal. I know that guy. There's a lot of women back there too that we got to talk about. We're going to be talking about one of them coming up here this fall. But that's a surprise for another date.
Yeah, surprise! I'll leave that in the box for you later. No, but you talk about this wall of information or things that interest you, and that was this shift that we made in this podcast of you interested in the sciences and the airplanes and the spaceships, and me interested in leadership and philosophy of leadership and discussing and being open about mental health and those type of things, and breaking away from the societal thing of sports and politics and into this bigger exploration of life. And I think if you would look at our episode list, you could create that wall that you're talking about and have these educational components and pieces and exploration and life and joy represented on that wall, painted by Raphael with fresco paint. I'm pretty sure is what that would.
No, we're going to use food coloring in drywall mud. Was the plan? If you remember,
drywall plaster.
Yeah. Whatever. I think it's just called drywall compound, Zach.
I think it's called drywall plaster. Sounds a lot more official than drywall mud, which just sounds like something you made up.
You're just sounding snooty. I think the guys who do drywall, they just call it mud, Zach. That's what it is. But this has been a real year. I'll say this. Most of the stuff we talked about on this podcast, I didn't know a year ago. I didn't know. I mean, I knew some of the things, but in order to talk about this, I had to go back, read what I...
Wait. So what you're telling me is the history degree I got in college actually was beneficial.
How much of this did you know?
Like if I was leading the history discussion, probably most of it.
Okay, I'll give you that one. But there's been it is amazing to me. I guess I knew the Lewis and Clark one because I had read that a long time ago.
You've been telling me that story since I was like -2 years
Zach,
old.
it's such a great story. It is such a phenomenal story. If you haven't listened to episode, which one is Lewis and Clark, Zach?
I don't know.
Episode Lewis and Clark. It's The Great Explorer, episode 14. If you haven't listened to that is a phenomenal story of if you wonder why Americans view themselves the way they do, that story is part of it. Okay. It points to this. You can't hear that story and not think about divine providence. Yeah, I mean, we can have all sorts of discussions about whether or not people should conquer lands or go exploring or who was here first. We can have all those discussions. But you can't hear that story and not think, wow, something special is going on here. This is a very, very interesting thing. So I mean, these stories that we've talked about, they are all so rich. And the other thing that I picked up is in talking to the people that we've brought on as guests, their stories of their lives and the things they've done, they've been wonderful. Some of these people we asked to come on and they were like, well, I'm not sure I'm very interesting. And we're like, no, you have a story, a unique story in history, and we want to hear what it is. Come on and tell us your story. I'm sure you have something in there that's interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting and good that you bring up the idea of like us bringing on guests who are like, oh, well, I'm not sure. Like No, you sharing your story, whatever that story may be, is and will positively impact somebody, regardless of if you know that somebody or not. And by doing that and having that continual open conversation about, like, hey, I've done X, Y, and Z. Here's how I got here. I was successful or not successful, or I stumbled or I failed. All of those things will maybe help motivate somebody to, maybe take that leap of faith, maybe to go out and, pursue their adventure of life in a way that they were maybe hesitant to do before, because Jenny was on the podcast and she told the story about doing that, and that motivated that person to do it. Or maybe somebody was feeling, empty and alone, that like whatever they're going through is just to them, but somebody comes in and they share a similar experience and they feel like, okay, there's a connection there, there's a bond there, that maybe it's not interaction human on human. COVID has prevented a lot of that, but it's still an interaction and a bond that someone else has been through something, and that they can give you a lesson, a life lesson, to help elevate your life to the next level.
The episode that we did with my father, with your grandfather, about his stories.
I did not do that episode.
You didn't do that episode, did you? That was your brother. Okay, the episode that you skipped out on.
First of all, I edited that episode. For everybody wondering at home, I do all of this, a bunch of editing behind the scenes, and Rafe's just like, "Hey, look at this fun thing I thought."
Yeah, this is my job as the podcaster emeritus here at Bufnagle Enterprises is to spout randomly and cause great peril for Zach as he has to edit these things. And Zach, I'll have you notice I've cleaned my desk, and the Lego blocks that normally sit on my desk and cause all that noise when we're recording, they're all gone now. All right. But I do have this pocket knife here. So if you hear me playing with the pocket knife, that's a prelude to me slicing my finger. So if this ends in screaming and blood, if you hear blood, that's me playing with the pocket knife. The episode we did with your grandpa, Zach, the number of people that contacted us and said, I just loved those stories, to hear about what things were like. And I think a lot of us have stories from our childhood that are interesting and exciting, about the days before things got as complicated. And there's a song. Yeah, well, there's a song by one of these country artists, Before Everything Was Automatic. She talks about driving a stick shift car and having to go buy a stamp to put it on a letter. And it was a different age. And people hear that and they think, I guess, nostalgically about some of that. And some of it is probably worthwhile nostalgia, and some of it might be a little bit maybe misdirected. I don't know, but they love that episode. And everybody has stories like that about interesting things that happened when they were growing up.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned before, everyone has a story, and everyone's story deserves to be told and shared. And your story of life, your adventure in life, is unique and is special. And the more that you understand that, the more that you own that, the more that you're going to be able to impact and positively impact people around you, regardless of if you have a direct relationship with that person. We can create, immense amount of impact on people just by being open and just by talking, on a podcast, as silly, enjoyable, and profound as this podcast can be.
Wait, did you say silly, enjoyable, and profound?
Yeah.
I like that. I'm going to write that one down.
Wait, is that out of line?
I have to write it down.
Am I wrong?
No,
not a lie, but
silly, enjoyable. See, I can't even spell enjoyable. And profound. I don't even know how to spell. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Well, we'll work on that, Zach. We'll get those pictograms. Silly, enjoyable, and profound. We'll have to put that on the tagline. It'll come out of there somewhere. It has been a phenomenal year. I look back, Zach, at some of the like the episodes where we had guests. We had some military guys on there. Remember Cinderblock talking about the helicopter stuff that he did, and Perry talking about the tanks and stuff. Those were things I didn't even know I didn't know. I kind of know how a helicopter works because let me rephrase that. I know the theory behind a helicopter.
Magic.
It has magic sparkle dust, I think. But actually having somebody who's done that thing and talk us through that was phenomenal. And the tank stuff blew me away. No pun. It was amazing what Perry says those things have been doing. And let's not forget America's favorite rocket scientist. Bob has been a trooper for us. And what do you call that? An unsung hero. He has been he's helped us when we've needed a fill in, and he has provided us all sorts of. Zach, you know what he's done for us? He's given us straight scientific information while we at the same time have been mocking him relentlessly about his scientific prowess, and he takes
the
it
Mars.
over. Yeah, we call it the Mars, right? And you should see his face when we do this. Zach will say, well, we've been to the moon. And I'll say, yeah, and we're going to go to the Mars. And Bob has this look on his face like he just wants to reach through the camera and just strangle us for calling it the Mars. So he wants to call it what? Mars or like the sun or Sol. It's like, nah, come on, Bob. It's the Mars. It's the moon. It's the sun.
It's the Earth.
It is the Earth. That's what it is. And, so Bob has been incredible.
And he supports us too, which is probably the best part.
And he's a big supporter. So I'm going to say that I'm going to take this opportunity to admonish those listeners out there who listen to the podcast regularly, but don't tell their friends, right? Because you know what you're doing? You are prohibiting your friends from getting the same joy that you do. So share, what do we say? Seek the good, be the good, spread. That's part of the spread the good is
that's on you.
Yeah, that's on you guys. Okay. And that's why you get admonished to spread the good. The conversation we had with Eli on esports, I had somebody from a university contact me the other day, and they said, our university is going into esports. We're going to have an esport team. We're trying to figure out how to do the financing and stuff on that. And they said, your episode was really, really helpful. And that was wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like it's little things like that a silly, profound, enjoyable podcast can give you, and that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, we goof off a little bit, maybe a little too much, but that's serious. Part of the charm. And we're gonna do these things where we're focusing on the people, we're focusing on the stories, because I've mentioned it, and I will dig it into the ground for as long as I have a microphone in front of me and I get to talk about it. Of the positive impact we can have on people's lives. And that is such an important thing to do, because as weird as it sounds, an esports episode being able to help a college university with an esports program and understanding the financial commitment that is positively impacting someone's life that they may or may not know.
That is the thing that I never dreamed that kind of thing would show up. And so you don't, anybody who's built anything, whether you're writing software or whether you're building a piece of furniture, or whether us recording the silly, enjoyable, and profound podcast is, we're building a thing that people get to use, and you can never imagine how it's going to be used and how it's going to impact people. So that's been a real benefit to this podcast, at least that I've been able to see. Not only that, but it keeps Zach and I off the streets for an hour every week, right? So, but look at those other things though. Like Zach, Jenny came on and told us about her. I was expecting her to come on and tell us about the planner. The story she told, I had no idea. Zach, this was a friend of mine from college, and I don't want to say we drifted apart, because that's kind of like implies that we were together and then drifted. It was like I knew her in college. She was a friend of mine, and then she went her way and I went my way, and then boom, here we are back together. That was an amazing story she told, and it's so wonderful to see. It's wonderful to see people achieving in their life something good that matters to them, because it just makes you feel good. And it was great to be able to tell her story on this podcast.
Yeah, and the celebrate people and what they've achieved. Like, they might not think it's great, but like if you get to achieve something and you set a goal for something and you get to say like, hey, I did that, instead of like maybe for a little bit of time focusing on whatever the next goal is, and be able to bask and just for a little bit of time, however that is, and without that. And the fact that you can say like, hey, I did that thing. And you can be like, hey, this is how I did that. And you can share that and you can celebrate that. That's such a powerful thing, regardless of how small it may seem on the outside. And again, like I mentioned before, that's going to impact somebody in the same way.
I don't remember what episode we talked about this, but there's a difficulty now with the world being I'll say as small as it is and as tight as it is, because what you see instantaneously whenever it happens is you see the phenomenal things. All right. It's very difficult these days to be the local hero because there's no more local. Everything is global. And if you're not, you may be the leader of your, you may start a small business and build a planner and make it available for folks. And you know what? You may not be selling, 60,000 copies a day, but you've done something, you've achieved something, and that should be celebrated. And it's really easy to get down on yourself for that. You say, well, I didn't do anything very important. My life really doesn't matter that much. And you know what? We said this before, Zach, your life matters to us, right? If we want to tell your story, if you have somebody who's got a story, Zach, I met this lady today. I was talking to her, and she said that when she was in college, she met this guy. She had this roommate, and this roommate had this boyfriend, and the boyfriend had a friend. And she said, you should go out with this guy. And this lady was like, I don't know if I should go with this guy. She's like, please do it for me. So the lady I met went out with this guy, and it turned out this guy didn't have an arm. He just had a hook. He literally had a hook on his hand. He had lost his hand. He was a pilot, and he was at a small airport, and he was starting the propeller, and it caught his arm. And she said he was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Humble and funny and charming. And he had this hook on his hand, and he used that as as like a prop for all of his jokes. And then she said that they broke up. And a while later, the girl came to her and said, I really need you to go out with this other guy. And she was like, oh, really? Tell me he's missing his hand. She was like, well, I got to tell you, he's missing his foot. And this guy, so it was like she was going out with these pirates. Okay. So one guy's got a hook, one guy's got a peg leg. And then she was, after a while, she was working in the hospital as a nurse, and she met this doctor guy. And the doctor guy that she was dating said, yeah, one day I was working in the ER, and this guy comes in, and he had lost his hand in an airplane it's like, I know that guy. All right. So these you have these little tiny stories out there, and I'm going to have to get her on here to tell her story as well, because there are so many good stories. Now, I'm sure you guys have stories out there, and it's not quite as exciting as losing your hand or losing your foot. We don't go do that just so you can get on this show. I guess that's the first lesson. All right. But we'd love to hear your stories. I'm sure you have funny stories, interesting stories, heartwarming stories, sad stories that teach lessons. And that is all about the human experience. And we are here to share that in the context of the good.
Yeah. And that is the pursuit of that good. That's the pursuit of the adventure of life that we want to celebrate and understand. And with that said, we have a bunch of really fun topics coming to you in the future. Rafe already teased one that I'm not allowed to let the cat out of the bag for. We're finishing up the Zachisms with the final one of being kind and tying that all together with a nice little bow. We're bringing in some other people who've had some fantastic life stories and the lessons that they've learned along the way. And I don't know, as we continue to grow this thing, as we continue to do this thing, we are thankful and we are grateful for having people listen to us and to take these stories and to use them in their life and do good in that way. And we hope you continue to join us on this journey.
Yeah, we have to finish up. We're gonna actually get to Marco Polo. We talked about the Mongols. Zach, I found out the other day there's a show on Netflix about Marco Polo, and I watched the first episode of the first season. I guess I don't know if it's one season or multiple seasons. And there's Genghis Khan, or there's the great Kublai Khan, and he talks about his grandfather. And there's all the other Obadiah Khan or whatever the guy's name was, and Kublai Khan and Cranky Khan, Dopey Khan, all those other Khans were there. And oh no, are those the seven dwarfs?
Okay. Those are the seven descriptors of my older brother.
the seven different Khans. All right, but there's a show on Netflix about Marco Polo, and I don't know how much of it is accurate history, but apparently it's like political intrigue and trying to charm the local ladies. But that's out there. And that's a Marco Polo thing. And we're going to get to the actual Marco Polo story and why he matters in understanding the relationship between East and West. That's coming up. There's a number of other stories that we're hitting in the history realm. We have a number of great personal life stories that are on their way. So we encourage you to stay attuned to the to the Bufnagle podcast. I don't want to say it the Bufnagle podcast, but that's not right, is it, Zach? It's Bufnagle, the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Does it matter? Do the branding people care or what?
Aren't you the branding people?
Oh, that's right. All right. Do I care?
Yeah,
I don't know. It has been a great year, and I have to say, we are so thankful for the people who have reached out, the people who listen. I hope we provide some entertainment. I hope we provide a little perspective and some lessons about things. It's been a great year for me, Zach. I think probably for you as well, and we're looking forward to another one.
it's been a fun time. We like telling these stories. We like sharing these stories. We like these adventures. We like this good pursuit that we're on, and we will continue to be on that until someone says that we can't. And then even then, we'll probably stay around for a little bit longer. But until then, thank you all for listening. I want to remember to seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.